So what is cab control? Well, it's nothing to do with these. Let me explain. Now, cab control is an analog DC thing. If you are running DCC, this will be less relevant to you, but there will be some relevance perhaps in terms of the sectionalization of your layout. Power districts, I believe DCC refer to them as. I don't use DCC, so I'm no expert. So what I'm talking about here is a layout which is broken up into sections, DC operated analog control. Now here's a typical little layout. We've got a terminus station, we've got a little siding, and we've got some storage sidings, and you can sit in the middle of this layout and you can run your trains from storage into the terminus and from the terminus back into storage as many times as you like. But what happens if one of your mates comes around and you decide, both of you, to operate the layout? Well, immediately that means there's going to be two controllers. So you need some way of determining who is going to have control over which bit of track at any one time. Now you can see on a DC layout that is more important than perhaps a DCC layout. That said, of course, if you're running DCC, you're still going to need a system to determine who's got right of way over a certain piece of track. But that's for the DCC boys to sort out. For the minute, we're talking about how we operate a DC analog layout, and this is where cab control comes in. Well, the obvious split here is to have the station under one control and the storage sidings under another. If I'm sitting in the station and you're sitting in the storage sidings, and I bring trains towards me and you two take trains towards you. But what happens if either of us wants to shunt the factory siding? How do we then decide who has control of it? And so comes about the first big question of cab control, and that is the sectionalization of the layout. Here is the suggestion for the sectionalization of this small layout. The red section is the station, the yellow section is the storage, and the blue section is the factory. Now under this arrangement you can see that you can have control of the storage sidings and I can have control of the station, and I can shunt and do whatever I like up to and including that point where the red stops. And then either of us, by pulling a switch, perhaps can control the blue bit. Well, that's a very simple solution, and that is in essence cab control. There is somewhere a switch that determines who's going to have control of what. Now if I want to bring a train from storage into my station, I will take control of yellow and blue and red, and my train arrives. If you're taking a train from the station back into storage, you take control of red, blue and yellow, and you take the train away. That's how cab control works. Now the easiest way to determine which bit of track belongs to which controller is by using these. These are double pole, double throw switches. We used to call them two-way center off. You connect the track to the two middle pins, and the two outer pins are live whether you select left or right on the switch to decide who has control of which section of track. Each of the sections has a switch, so on this little layout we have three switches, one for the red section, one for the blue and one for the yellow. Now if you have more than two controllers, clearly you can't simply use a two-way center off switch, so you would then use some kind of rotary switch, but the principle is the same. The key here is that you connect the track to the common pair of pins, not the controller. If you imagine this the other way round, if you connect the controller to the center pair and then you use the switch to determine whether you control section A or section B, then both of you can select section A, and that causes problems. If it's the track that's connected to the center pins, the switch then selects my controller, your controller. You don't have that situation of two controllers trying to control the same bit of track. Now here is a larger layout that again has three sections, and you can see here how red, blue and yellow, three switches, 3 controllers, so you'd obviously need to have some kind of rotary controller here so that whoever's sitting in the blue station can have a train from the yellow section down through the red and into his own blue station. Again, centre pins used for the track, and he selects from the controllers. Now I just want to go back to our smaller layout and ask a question. If I'm sitting in the red station, how far can I go to shunt before I end up running onto the blue track? Well, you need some kind of indicator. Well, the real railways had the same problem, and that's why you had what's called an advanced starter signal. In effect, the limit of your shunt. So my train in my red station can depart if the platform signal is right, but it can't go past that second stop signal unless I've got permission to do so. In other words, unless the cab control system is set up to allow the train to drive onto the blue section. And how do I know if I can go onto the blue section? Well, I use signal box bell codes. You can start to see how the cab control system actually starts to reflect what real life was like. I can control my red section, but I can give control to somebody else, or I can take control and send a train somewhere else if I've given the right bell code, if the answer has come back, if the signals are pulled off, and my trains can depart. That's how it works in real life. Why don't we do that on our models? And so bringing this back to my new Yarslow layout, you can see that I've got red and blue and green and yellow and brown sections, and a master cab control panel in the bottom right hand corner. It's this panel that will control all of the rotary switches that will determine which controller has control of which piece of track. It will be possible, if I happen to be sitting at, say, the branch, to run a train from the city terminus on the green section through the yellow section out onto the blue, into Yarslow, across the main line taking control of red, onto the brown, all the way around the branch onto the orange, and finally into High Marsh. So I can have control of every section of the layout from one controller, and that's done with the master cab control panel. And whilst I'm doing that, because of the way the master cab control panel works and the way cab control works, nobody else is going to drive their train into mine. That's how the real railways worked. That's how our models should work. So that's cab control for you. On a DC layout, the perfect way of making sure that we run our trains just as they did in real life.